Hey biology, it's time for part 2 of our study of seedless plants. Hopefully we won't get too many distractions, kind of want to show you a few things today. So we're doing the screen thing. And so while we're recording, you might see some things like this in the background. Say hello, Sunday. Or not. Okay, good. Be a good cat. All right. For the start of our lesson today, just a brief review and to introduce something new. Hopefully you have one note out. We're going to get looking at algae again in review, and then start looking at our other seedless plants that have vascular tissue. So if you look at this screen, I've got green algae and then a vascular plant. Now this vascular plant uses seeds. Okay, that plant, because it has seeds, is very different in its structure. Green algae, remember, doesn't have roots, very simple. So the question, which organism is specialized? Well, you're asking which organism has different kinds of cells. Green algae, all their cells are the same. In fact, we learned that they can copy themselves, right? So vascular plants often have more specialized cells. And we'll talk about their cells a little more today. But let's start by talking about a vascular plant and some of its characteristics. So vascular plants have what are called vascular tissue. A vascular tissue is a tissue that can be used to move material through it. They talk about it as being more like a tubing of some sort. And we know plants have those tubes in them because they have to get water from their roots all the way up to their leaves. So how do they do that? Well, inside they have cells that are called tracheae. The tracheae cells are kind of shaped like a can. They have a can shape to them. Okay, got that can shape, and they stack on each other too. And so they stack up like this as they go through one after the next, so that they make almost a tube-like structure so that water can pass right through them. And the only reason that they can do that, stack up on top of each other, is because of a strong protein that they have inside them called lignin. Okay, lignin is a very strong protein in which we find it being tough. We talk about cells having cell walls. Lignin is a big part of that as to why they can grow so tall. Okay, which means that we now have special tubing inside the plant. The main tubing, it's like the central elevator of the plant, is the xylem. It's going to be moving minerals and water from the roots of the plant all the way up through its structure to the leaves. That's the job of the xylem, to bring it into the plant. Which brings a question to mind. Okay, ooh, that's not supposed to happen. There we go. What causes water and minerals to move through a plant root? See, when we want to bring things into our body, we have a muscle system, right? When you take a bite of something, you chew it, you swallow, and then muscle pushes it through your system. Okay, but plants don't have that. So what do they do to get water and minerals inside? Well, it's a pretty simple system, actually. All the leaves of the plant have water released that evaporates into the air. Okay? So this is evaporation happening up here. And because that water evaporates, it gets replaced from water further inside the plant. And that water gets replaced from water further inside the plant until you're all the way down into the roots. Okay? And the water is moving towards evaporation, and it's empty here at the end of the roots. So to fill the roots with water, to keep water balanced inside the plant and out, it sucks in water from the ground. And there you have the whole system happening there through the xylem. Okay? Now a similar process is going to be used to move things to all the different cells of the plant. Because remember, these leaves are going through photosynthesis, right? And so we've got to move all those sugars from place to place too. So the xylem isn't going to be the only vascular system, the system that moves fluids. We're also going to have what's called the phloem. And the phloem is going to be moving nutrients and carbohydrates from the leaves and other cells throughout the rest of the plant. Okay, so that when you look at these two, this is like the stem, okay, of a plant. And in the stem, you're going to find both phloem and xylem systems. The xylem is normally central and bigger. Okay. And then the phloem is normally smaller and not as robust. But you can see there's the phloem there, these four right here. And then the red that makes the X right here is the xylem. So the xylem is moving things into the plant. Say these are the roots down here. Okay. The phloem is more moving them out. Okay. Xylem in, phloem out to the different parts of the plant so that nutrients can get to where they need to go. All right, time for seedless vascular plants, the fern. All right, biology, we're going to give this a shot because this is my backyard. You can see the fence line back there and the grill. Shout out to Juan Fennell. Hope you're doing some grilling, buddy. I wanted to share with you my backyard because I don't have brick like most people do. But it works out pretty well in our favor here because I have seedless vascular plants in my backyard. So you take a look at the ground here a little bit. Let me walk you around. Let's see if you can spot a fern as we walk. Okay. Might be better if I get a little bigger. There we go. That's better. All right. So you can take a look at the different plants that I have in my backyard. Among these are ferns. Okay. Yep, there's my grill. And what I want to point out about the fern is that it has some major differences from different plants. Because if you look at its leaf pattern, okay, that has a special name to it, which we'll talk about in a minute. Also has a very strong root system. So you can take a look at the root system here. There it is. The root system, nice, strong, thick, tough root system. So that's different than a lot of plants too, the way it tangles itself. But then the last thing I want to show you is on the very top of the leaves here. You might be able to spot the dots there, the dots on the back side. Okay, those little dots are spores. Okay, and those spores aren't very easily seen here, but I'll show you on the picture when we get back. Those spores are used for reproduction. Okay, and we'll check them out all here and take some notes on them in a little bit. Okay, but you can probably find them in your backyard too if you take a close look. Okay, well, that was an adventure. Well, taking a look at this plant, you can see all those spores too on our seedless plants on the back side that we'll talk about in a minute. But let's do some quick note taking on the fern. So I showed you outside that it has a strong root system. And its leaf pattern is called fronds. So when you look at leaves on a fern, you can call it fronds. These are the fronds that are opening up. Its unique characteristics is that it really requires little light. So in my backyard, it gets a lot of shade, not a lot of sunlight that happens out back there. So it's the perfect place for them to grow because Florida is seasonally wet and there's very little sunlight back there. And so it allows ferns to grow very well. And so ferns grow all over the place back there. And just briefly on the life cycle, we talked about the spores that we find on the underside. And hopefully the pictures there showed you a little bit of that. But when those spores form, they have a unique shape to them. They have a heart shape when those spores start to grow and they reach the ground. Okay, to wrap up our lesson, there are a couple things I'm going to ask you to do. First, on your notes, it says describe a diagram with the following terms: vascular tissue, tracheates, lignin, xylem, and phloem. It says describe, okay, so I want you to write about this diagram. If you're curious where you see a lot of this diagram, I want you to, where you see these terms in this diagram, I want you to look closely at this central part right here. Notice how these cells are different than the ones around them. This is a nice big thick cell, right? and you have other block cells. But these cells are more can-like and stack. Okay? So there are your tracheids that are filled with lignin. And the two central tunnels right here form the xylem and the phloem. Okay? I'm not too sure which one's which. We'd probably have to study what's in them. Okay? But the two central tubes right here that I'm coloring, okay, those are definitely our xylem and phloem, and they're formed of vascular tissue. So let's hope you can put that together in a description for me. Okay, the other one is a lab, a mini lab that I want you to work on. This is why I'm going to give you a bit to finish these. And then tomorrow, if you have questions, you can ask in class. But I want you to finish analyzing data. It's about how far ferns can grow, how far their spores can grow. What I'm hoping you recognize in this lab is that the further you travel from the original plot of land where the ferns are growing, okay, the less grow, which makes sense. The spores aren't going to travel as far. More of them are going to land closer to the plot. See that? And so then you have before dispersal and after dispersal, how many ferns were growing in each area. Okay, so read read directions very carefully, and that'll help you answer these 4 questions below. Okay, tomorrow we're going to be meeting as a lab group, and I'd like to try and finish our cell lab for plants, which means that there we go. Which means that I'm going to ask you to get your lab ready to go from OneNote, and we will spend time looking at the onion cell. Now, maybe not everyone made it to the onion cell, and you can contact me about that. But I'd like to spend time looking at an onion cell under the microscope with you and labeling some of the parts to try and help you finish that lab. So that's the goal. So that's seedless plants, and then through the rest of the week, we'll start studying the other types of plants. So have a blessed day.